you kids like adventure? I sure do. Swashbuckling tales of pirates and explorers and treasure hunters and general rapscallions off searching through exotic locales and lost worlds for relics and plunder while experiencing general mayhem along the way. While you kids here watching my channel might not be aware, in my regular life, it's no secret that pulp adventure is my favorite genre of all time. I even wrote 3 adventure novels and self-published them. Okay, Dad, you might be asking, that sounds great and all, but what the hell is pulp adventure? Great question. Sit down and have a lollipop, kids. You deserve one for asking the right things. Back in the late 1800s, pulp magazines, or the pulps, as they were often referred to, published extravagant fictional stories and got their name from being printed on paper made of cheap wood pulp. Pulp magazines generally held within their glorious pages lurid tales of the grotesque, sensational exploits such as treasure hunts in faraway countries, or bloody detective tales in the heart of the noir-laden city. It should come as no surprise that both detective fiction and hero fiction were popular aspects of the pulp mags, but these magazines were also home to tales of zeppelins and airplanes and two-fisted adventurers on the trail of lost civilizations and ancient treasure. It's still a popular genre even to this day. Now, when some of you think of pulp adventure in gaming, the first character that probably pops into your head is Nathan Drake from the Uncharted series. For others, you might be thinking of Lara Croft from Tomb Raider, and for those of you older kids in the audience, you might be thinking of Indiana Jones. All 3 of these characters have enjoyed a number of video games across PC and consoles, each one of them owing no small amount of influence to the others. As of this writing, each franchise has cribbed off of the others so much that it would take an entire history video to track down the differences between the chickens and the eggs. However, we're not here to talk about any of those characters. We're here to talk about Alan Quatermain, or more specifically, his great-grandson, James Lee Quatermain. Alan Quatermain was the protagonist of the novel King Solomon's Mines, originally published in 1885 and written by H. Rider Haggard. To make a long story short, King Solomon's Mines was essentially the birth of the pulp adventure genre, certainly the origin of the Lost World genre, and was the first English novel to be set directly in Africa. The main character, Alan Quatermain, is a hunter and trader who has spent most of his life living in South Africa, and the plot of the book finds him wrapped up in a search for the fabled treasure to be found in King Solomon's Mines. Quatermain's character directly inspired the creation of Indiana Jones, which inspired the creation of Lara Croft, which in turn inspired the creation of Nathan Drake. You kids like how I always bring this shit full circle? To say that King Solomon's Mines had a massive impact on the literary genre of adventure would be a huge understatement. Without this book, and furthermore without the other writings of H. Rider Haggard, we wouldn't have Edgar Rice Burroughs or Robert E. Howard. Imagine pop culture without Tarzan or Conan the Barbarian. Haggard's works were an influence on both of their tales, which is precisely why the world of Alan Quatermain is prime real estate for modern adventure storytelling. Now, there have been a few attempts at adapting Quatermain, and more specifically, King Solomon's Mines, into modern media, to varying degrees of success. Richard Chamberlain played Quatermain in an adaptation of King Solomon's Mines, as well as a sequel. Sean Connery played Quatermain in the infamous League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and I fucking love that movie, so I don't care what anyone says, do not say, and even Patrick Swayze took a turn at playing the character. Sadly, none of these versions of Quatermain were successful enough to elevate the character's profile to the same heights as the characters that he inspired, but that didn't stop others from trying. Enter today's game, Deadfall Adventures. What the hell does Deadfall even mean? Deadfall Adventures is a first-person shooter / adventure game, released on November 15th, 2013 for PC and Xbox 360. It was developed by Polish studio The Farm 51 and published by Nordic Games. Originally announced on March 1st, 2013, the game had a bit of a fraught development cycle, getting pushed back twice from its original release date of July 30th of that year. It released to, fair to middling reviews, and the eventual PS3 release didn't fare much better. That one was released on October 28th, 2014, with the new subtitle Heart of Atlantis. The PS3 release boasted reworked graphics, a survival mode, a co-op mode, and even new boss fights. From what I can tell, it doesn't look like these features ever made their way over to the PC version, despite the Farm 51 stating in a Facebook post that they were working on doing so. With the Deadfall Adventures Facebook page and official Twitter account both silent since 2015, and zero mention of Deadfall Adventures on Farm 51's Twitter account since 2013, I kind of doubt we're going to get any updates to that anytime soon. The Farm 51 is still active and developing games today, but just from a historical perspective, they are really fascinating because they are part of a triumvirate of Polish game studios that have all released absolute bangers over the last 20 years, but haven't really gotten the kind of recognition that you would think that they should. So there are a lot of names involved with these games and studios, and I'm going to make sure that they receive the credit they deserve. However, despite me being a quarter Polish and having grown up around the language and culture, I have no idea how to pronounce these names properly without butchering them to fuck. So I'm going to flash their names across the screen when appropriate to make sure that you're actually watching what's happening here and not, off crocheting or something. Anyways, let's go. To start with, the Farm 51 was founded in 2005 by two developers who previously worked at People Can Fly. People Can Fly was founded in 2002, with their first game being Painkiller in 2004. So, Farm 51 gets set up in 2005, and the first game that they develop is motherfucking Necrovision, followed by Painkiller Hell and Damnation, then Deadfall Adventures, Get Even, Chernobylite, and most recently, World War III. People Can Fly continued onward after Painkiller to go develop Bulletstorm, Gears of War Judgment. They co-developed fucking Fortnite, and they most recently developed the game Outriders. Meanwhile, as all of this was happening, Epic Games acquired People Can Fly in 2012 after working closely with the studio during the development of Bulletstorm and Gears of War Judgment. This acquisition prompted the three original founders of the studio to leave and start up their own development house called The Astronauts. The Astronauts' first game was the fucking vanishing of Ethan Carter. And their most recent game, which is still in development, is Witchfire. So between these three studios, we got all of these games? Baffling. Absolutely fucking baffling. Now, one of the things that's really fascinating about Deadfall Adventures is that you don't really see a lot of pulp adventure games from a first-person perspective. Classically speaking, most adventure games are in third person. Without doing a deep dive into gaming history, our best example of adventure games comes in the form of point-and-click adventure games. Looking at these, we could see how the literary genre of adventure was translated into computer gaming, with titles such as King's Quest, The Secret of Monkey Island, and, oh look, Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis. Adventure games are usually story-driven with little emphasis on action, leaning more into puzzles and exploration. It makes sense that they would be mostly from a third-person perspective in order to navigate your character around said exploration, searching for puzzles, taking in the sights and sounds that the developers had crafted for your immersion. Adventure games were slowly working their way into 3D graphics territory by the time Tomb Raider debuted in 1996, which took the formula of point-and-click adventure games, gave it a facelift, and directed gamers to navigate environments directly, all while tossing in thrilling set pieces and gunplay. Indiana Jones himself would make this shift into 3D as well in 1999 with the release of the criminally underrated Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, which, despite not being as successful as Lara Croft's entries into the genre, heralded a sea change for adventure games in general. While not being entirely responsible for the swift decline of the popularity of point-and-click adventures, the move into 3D, coupled with more responsive and immediate action set pieces, kinda did spell doom for games like Monkey Island and King's Quest. Fortunately, despite falling by the wayside for a time, the point-and-click genre has seen a significant return to form through indie developers, which couldn't make me happier. So, we had Tomb Raider, we had Indiana Jones, and then Uncharted would eventually be released in 2007. Now, between these three franchises, adventure games solidified themselves as third-person cinematic experiences for gamers to not only play, but to bask in the visuals that made them feel like they were playing a movie. No, these three weren't literally the only adventure games out there, but I feel like a lot of fans would be hard-pressed to say that a series like Legend of Zelda falls into the adventure category. Personally, I've always placed that firmly into fantasy versus adventure. Adventure is airplanes and gunfights and lost civilizations in one form or another, brain teasers and fisticuffs. I wouldn't completely exclude swords and sorcery from the category, but it's not what I think of when someone says adventure. Ultimately, what we're trying to establish here is that adventure games from a first-person perspective are incredibly rare. Sure, we could argue that the Far Cry series could be labeled as adventure, and to an extent, I would agree with that, particularly with the third and fourth entries in the series. But even up until recently, first-person adventure was really rare, so much so that the recent announcement of Machine Games' Indiana Jones and the Great Circle being a first-person adventure game was met with outcry. Even I was hesitant to accept such a wild change, but after seeing the footage, I'm kind of genuinely excited to see how playing as Dr. Jones in first person could be fantastically refreshing. And, of course, I would be remiss if I didn't at least mention the recent release of Venturous, a Doom total conversion that throws the player into the shoes of a Jones-like adventurer, battling both human and supernatural foes alike. You kids better believe that I'm going to boot this up and give it a go at some point. It isn't 100% complete as of this writing. I'll put a link in the description if you kids want to hop on it sooner versus later. Okay, so now that we've gotten some background and explanations of pulp adventure and adventure gaming as a whole out of the way, let's take a look at Deadfall Adventures and what makes it so special and unique in the FPS category. And you better hold on to your hats, kids, because this is going to get kind of nuts. For starters, we've got all the usual tropes coming into play right off the bat. A couple of British agents are driving through Egypt on their way to see a man about a diary when a rapscallion in all black steals something important from them, tries to run off, but what ho! A daring trick shot swings a crane hook around and knocks the man to the ground, and we get our cinematic reveal of the man, the myth, the legend, James Lee Quatermain. Now, let me let you kids in on a secret. Right now, this guy, our hero, is so fucking milquetoast that he makes Adam Venture look like a fucking daredevil. And if you understood that reference, then all I can do is offer my condolences.
Whoa. If this weather keeps holding, I'd better start building an ark.
There is so much going on in this opening cinematic alone. First off, let me backtrack a little bit here to show the intro to all of this, which is absolutely, intentionally cribbing from Uncharted's narrative intros. Let's hold them up side by side real quick, and yeah, they're the same. They're exactly the goddamn same. We've also got the absolutely uncannily dead inside facial animations on every single character in this game. Agent Jennifer Goodwin here. Oh, God. Oh, her name is Jennifer. Oh, God. We get to meet Agent Jennifer Goodwin and her handler, Guillermo del Toro. Neither of them have any kind of emotion or realism or humanity in their faces. None. Nothing. Every character in this game looks like they have stared into the face of the abyss, and the abyss just kind of looked them up and down like that Ryan Gosling meme. Next on our trope list, we've got the driver, who is clad head to toe in black, and his face is wrapped up in a way that screams, "I am secretly a bad guy!" And then he immediately reveals himself to be a bad guy. Quick side note, this guy here is referred to as an Arab, and there are other bandits like him, also referred to as Arabs later on in the game. And while this is probably on brand for 1938, unfortunately, I just couldn't help but cringe every time one of our heroes shouted out, "Here comes another Arab!" Like, it just, I don't even know if that's factually correct, or if it's offensive, or somewhere in between. I don't know. The problem here is, it just felt cringy. Next up, Jennifer here just fucking stands still and fires off one shot in the dude's direction and misses, and what? And then we have James Lee Quatermain being absolutely extra by trick-shotting the crane hook to swing around and bap the dude in the face, who falls over with the slow-motion grace of bad mocap. And then the camera just pans up and zooms in like, oh man, isn't he so fucking cool? And then the delivery of this line.
You should pick your drivers more carefully around these parts.
The fucking specificity of how he delivers that is so choice. So choice. The line delivery in this game is all over the goddamn map, and I absolutely love it. Take this one, for example.
Quatermain. Always a pleasure to meet a man of such august extraction, even under these unfortunate circumstances.
A man of what? Of such august extraction? What the fuck does that? Hold on. Let me look this up. Oh, well, that's actually kind of neat. I'm gonna have to try and slip in the phrase august extraction into my everyday usage now. Meanwhile, as our characters retreat back to James's pad in Cairo, the tropes just keep on coming. The professor and Agent Jennifer here are with some kind of paranormal investigation group out of Egypt. They've come in search of James's grandfather's compass, which has some kind of mystical power that they want to use to help them find a supposedly powerful artifact called the Heart of Atlantis, which is literally never explained, but we'll talk about that one later. The professor wants James to come along on the adventure. Grumpy James doesn't want to, but James is also heavily in debt because of his gambling addiction, and he could use the money. And of course, when the professor says Agent Goodwin could use someone with experience out there to watch her back, James immediately turns and stares at Agent Jennifer's ass, and the camera just hangs there like, we are at full stereotype here, kids. Full send. There's just so many tropes already. The sandstorm obscuring our vision, the native driver who ends up stealing from the white people, the big white hunter with his big fucking rifle, the overly sexy British agent who has a past with the reluctant hero who still maybe has a crush on her. Oh, and somehow the British Paranormal Investigation Society somehow works for America? James continually, throughout the course of the game, admonishes Agent Jennifer for working for Uncle Sam, despite her and the professor both being clearly British. There is so much promise here, kids. So much promise here right now that this is going to be a popcorn crunching, side-splitting, janky-ass time at the B-movies. And for the most part, the game story is pure pulp adventure boilerplate that delivers on that promise. We open up, as you've already seen, in Egypt, where the first part of the Heart of Atlantis supposedly is. After opening up a sealed entrance inside of a pyramid, a paranormal booby trap of some kind immediately knocks our heroes out. And then we're discovered and captured by Nazis, who are also looking for the Heart of Atlantis, and for who reasons of avoiding region locks do not display any swastikas or Nazi paraphernalia of any kind. Upon awakening, James scours his way through a series of combat encounters and ancient puzzles to discover that, whoops, mummies are very real in this universe, and they have an aversion to light. Which is fine, because somehow the flashlights in this version of 1938 can go all Alan Wake and focus an intense beam of light to burn the mummies' defenses away so we can kill them. We don't even need Energizer batteries to top up our flashlight. We just need to let them recharge on their own. Fuck you, Alan. Once we get deep enough into the pyramid and solve enough puzzles, we discover that the Heart of Atlantis was broken up into several pieces to prevent it from falling into the wrong hands. After this revelation, we discover that one of the Nazis, a man named Professor Hagen, is actually a spy working for the American British Paranormal Association, and he helps us to escape, after which we make our way to the Arctic to find the second piece of the heart. Here, we get to meet up with Hagen, and after a series of very unfortunate events, which include puzzle solving, exploding a Nazi installation, and more puzzle solving, we finally get the second piece of the Heart of Atlantis. But then Hagen betrays us after betraying his Nazi fellows, leaving us to die now that we've killed all the other Nazis for him.
So what are you, a triple agent?
And then the Russians show up. The fucking Russians show up, and the lead Russian commandant, who has a wicked scar over half his face, gives us his word that we will not come to harm if we surrender to him, and so we do surrender to him, and then he immediately starts torturing us for information. Oh, kids, this is what I fucking live for. James escapes the Russian compound, which somehow has built a series of minecart rails over and through a goddamn volcano, after which James manipulates a series of industrial machinery to crash through a skylight and rescue Agent Jennifer from the clutches of Commandant Scarface, who has chosen to run away like the coward he is. This leads to the final section of the game, where we carve a path through the Mayan jungle, alternating between battling Russians and more supernatural threats, which seem to be growing in both power and number as we unlock a series of ancient Mayan pathways that seem to be leading us directly into the underworld. Like, actually, the actual literal the underworld, which is fine. We finally defeat Commandant Scarface, only to start fighting more Arabs, who are under the payroll of Professor Hagen, which means that he sent that first bandit in the opening of the game, and hey look kids, we're coming full circle again. Hagen is mad with power at this point, and kidnaps Agent Jennifer, who I swear to God is only here in this game to be either, gorgeous or kidnapped. Who knows? I don't know. But this means that James is forced into unlocking the final puzzle standing between us and the last piece of the heart of Atlantis, which Hagen puts together, goes fully power mad, and after a boss fight, the whole of the temple collapses on top of him, and we get the hell out of Dodge. Afterwards, James apparently writes a novel based on their adventure. No, he fucking didn't. You're telling me that this brick shithouse, this dumb as nails idiot brick shithouse, wrote a goddamn book? He couldn't write a grocery list. Anyways, James and Jennifer stare off into the evening sunset, a couple now after their collective trauma. The game fades out, the credits roll, the end. And as surface level as that description gets, this story is absolute bananas bullshit in the best kind of way. None of this makes any sense. I remember throwing my hands up in the air when the Russians showed up out of goddamn nowhere. Like, we just magically have Russians now? And there's this whole sequence near the end of the game that involves manipulating light with an ancient Atlantean orrery inside of a Mayan temple, lighting up globes and shit that literally makes no sense, because we don't see technology like this anywhere else in the game before or after. And there are spurious connections between the Egyptian, Arctic, and Mayan set pieces. Like, which of these are the actual Atlanteans? Are any of them Atlantean? Do we even care? Well, I cared, goddammit, and this story makes no goddamn sense. We just get shunted all across the globe searching for a mythical culture that for no reason just gets held up next to Egyptian and Mayan cultures, like they think no one is going to notice that we're diving into these two separate mythologies while still somehow explicitly searching for Atlantean treasure. I mean, the actual true nature of the heart of Atlantis is never ever touched on, like ever. Hagen says it's a fucking conduit to the underworld or something. I don't fucking know. It's just an excuse to get us from point A to point B. And honestly, as far as stupid stories and first-person shooters go, this one really isn't all that bad. There's pretty sights, loud noises, guns go pew-pew, explosions go boom. Deadfall Adventures goes extra hard with the tropes and stereotypes and liberally borrows from other, better adventure franchises in order to string together a nonsense plot. And if you don't care about story in your FPS games, then don't worry, you won't care about this one either. And one thing I want to acknowledge is that this story, silly and stupid and superfluous as it is kind of charming. It's like a kid picking up random action figures and ham-fisting an excuse for Superman to fight Thor while the Starship Enterprise is defending itself against the Daleks. And yet, while the energy is here, and the earnestness is definitely on display, the actual act of playing this game is so fucking janky and sloggy that the chaotic nature of the story just churns to a boring grind far too quickly to provide even the guiltiest of pleasures. Something I want to point out real quick is that this is a really, really good looking game. The graphics on display, the art direction, all of this is frankly better than what this game deserves. There is, unfortunately, a lot of texture pop-in and some minor errors here and there that detract from the visuals sometimes, but whether we're driving through Egypt, running through the Arctic, riding a minecart through a volcano, or exploring in the South American jungle, Deadfall Adventures absolutely and masterfully succeeds at being a game that captures the tactile visual flair and atmosphere of a global adventure. I tried really hard to appreciate the splendor that we have before us here, kids, but as we're going to discover, that gets more and more difficult as we go through the game. For starters, this is a first-person shooter that is clearly a product of its time. This is a console shooter, 2-weapon carry limit, regenerating health, Call of Duty fun time, kids. Now, on one hand, there is definitely the fallback of using James's dual revolvers, which are notable for the fact that they have infinite ammo. However, these guns reload slow as constipated shit, so you're going to be better off picking up literally any of the other pistol sets in the game, of which there are very few and are nearly indistinguishable from the rest. Except for the double-barrel shotgun pistols, which are not nearly as powerful as they sound and hardly aim for beans. Deadfall Adventures does feature a wide variety of machine guns, rifles, shotguns, and even a couple of rocket launchers. I would love to go into any kind of detail about the different weapons, the pros and cons of using each, but the truth of the matter is that they all blur together into such a hazy sequence of ballistics that it doesn't really seem to matter which weapons you pick up. Of course, there are the basic differentials for you to consider for your playstyle. The various machine guns are all automatic and shoot rapidly. The shotguns pack a mean punch and shoot a little slower, although one of the two is a pump action and the other one is an automatic shotgun. The rifles are used for sniping. One of them has a scope and the other doesn't. But when the chips start to fall, it isn't gonna matter much which of these you may or may not prefer, because the guns available for your usage are entirely dependent on the environment and the weapons that the enemies will be carrying. And generally speaking, there are far more machine guns in combat at any given moment versus specialty weapons. If there are no shotguns around, then you're gonna run out of shotgun ammo and will be forced to pick up a machine gun. If there is no rifle ammo around, you're gonna run out of rifle ammo and be forced to pick up a machine gun. Ultimately, what will happen is that the ammo economics will funnel you into picking up one of several machine guns in rotation by the variety of enemies in the stage, none of which appear to have any different effects on your foes outside of fast bullets kill things fast, and all of them fire fast bullets. It's this lazy interchangeability that is but one piece of what makes the combat in this game so sludgingly boring. The other aspect is that there simply feels like there is no energy or immediate threat to the combat itself. Several times while facing down Nazis, Russians, and bandits, I felt like I was walking directly into the line of fire without having to worry much about whether or not I was taking damage of any kind. I had to work my ass off to feel threatened in this game, which then led to me getting a little too cocky sometimes when the game decided to ramp up the difficulty out of nowhere, and I found myself getting clocked left and right. Difficulty really is a strange, malleable presence in Deadfall Adventures. Bullets seem to have minimal effect on James Lee Quatermain, while explosives do a little bit more damage, but getting punched in the face is almost the kiss of death. Waltzing forward and picking off enemies like I was engaging with a shooting gallery was, at first, kind of confusing, and then became eventually so route and boring that I just didn't want to fight anyone or anything in this game anymore. Of course, when I say anything, I do mean anything. The undead are a strong presence for about a third of the game, mostly in the final jungle area. The key to them is that they are pretty much immune to your attacks unless you hold down the focus key on your flashlight and Alan Wake the fuckers until they glow bright orange, at which point you can drop them with a single bullet. Some of them are a little sturdier, but you get the idea. Gunplay against human-presenting enemies is plodding and boring in that they mostly just stand there and shoot at you until you drop them. Gunplay against undead enemies is a game of drain your flashlight focus, drop a mummy, then wait for your flashlight focus to recharge so you can repeat the process against the next closest mummy. All of this is a rinse-repeat exercise with little variety in the monsters and mobs you face down. Sure, the undead have a few variations, including the aforementioned mummies, Mayan jaguar men, conquistadors, and standard-issue zombies. Some of them even have shields they're carrying that you need to break before you flashlight focus them, but the general combat loop remains the same no matter what, and every enemy is brain dead, regardless of their living status. What really frustrates and adds to the slog of the game is that there are boss fights which pop up out of nowhere that have obscure requirements that aren't immediately apparent unless you happen to run up to a specific spot at the right time, and then you see a prompt telling you to place some dynamite or move a crane. The boss fight in the volcano where you need to manipulate 2 crane arms into position all while under constant fire from the foes around you is one of the most bullshit areas in this or any other game. When I played Deadfall Adventures originally back when it first came out in 2013, I was so confused by what to do here that I had to track down a walkthrough to figure it out. Coming back here 11 years later, I remembered what needed to be done, but the direction the game gives you is so minimal that you might as well get a Steam achievement just for figuring out how to get through this section. And again, I have to stress, you are required to stand still at 2 separate mechanical consoles, move 2 separate crane arms into position, then figure out how to get up on top of them to run across them to a skylight where you drop in and end the mission, all while under constant gunfire from the Russian enemies surrounding you. Even understanding how to do this now, it still took me multiple attempts to run this, simply because I didn't take out enough guards for me to stand still long enough to accomplish the task. And every time I thought I'd taken out enough guards, more teleported in while I was trying to move the cranes, and it was just so fucking tedious. Meanwhile, on the flip side of the coin, we've got the minecart ride, which on paper ought to be a thrilling, on-rails shooting experience where we get to fire our machine gun indiscriminately at the enemies also riding in minecarts, taking in the thrill of the explosions, the gunfire, the adventure of it all. Instead, the game, for some reason, mutes the volume on the music, the sound effects, and pretty much everything except the sound of your gun, and places you in the middle of a safe Disneyland ride where you're all but guaranteed to get through the sequence if you don't even shoot your weapon. And I am absolutely serious about that. I got halfway through the minecart run before I realized that the Russians in their minecarts were tipping over and taking themselves out if I wasn't able to kill them first. So I decided to experiment and spent the second half of the rail chase not firing at anything at all. And guess fucking what, kids? I made it through to the end. I literally didn't have to do anything to win. Holy shit!
This place is huge. It's like they ordered them to start digging and forgot to tell them when to stop.
Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom is my favorite movie of all time, and the minecart sequence in that 40-year-old flick still thrills and chills me every time I see it. So for this to drop the ball so massively is a letdown in ways that I can't even begin to express. I'm genuinely aghast here, kids. If there was a steady, even keel of 0 difficulty, or a steady, even keel of genuinely unfair difficulty, I would at least have some kind of understanding and maybe even a little less criticism for the game. As it stands, the strange yo-yoing of feeling completely indestructible to feeling squishier than SpongeBob SquarePants is just so baffling. And there's no discernible moment where this happens. It just kind of flips, and you're caught off guard by it. Like, oh god, what's going on? Why am I suddenly having a hard time? I just got so bored with how bland the shooting was that I finally just said, fuck it, I don't care about tactics. I don't care if I suddenly die out of nowhere. I'm just gonna run blindly into combat, run blindly into cover if I need to retreat, and then run blindly into combat again. And kids, it worked. That shouldn't fucking work in a first-person shooter. There's no rhyme or reason to this shit. Now, of course, combat is only one half of the game's intended playstyle, and the other half, believe it or not, is puzzle solving. Any Nathan Indiana Croft adventure wouldn't be worth its weight in gold if it didn't feature puzzle solving. And so, Deadfall Adventures limply puts its worst mummy foot forward in attempting to do so. Jesus Christ, these are all so mind-numbingly dull and tedious that they might as well be from early 2010s point-and-click mobile phone adventure games. Like, I would be more forgiving if there was an element of actual brain matter necessary to solve any of these goddamn things, but James is carrying around his great-grandfather's notebook, which contains clues to every single fucking puzzle in this stupid fucking game at the press of a button. And when I say clues, what I really mean is a cheat sheet. The notebook contains hand-drawn instructions to unlocking every mechanism, trap, and puzzle on James and Agent Jennifer's journey, obviously cribbing off of the Grail Diary trope instituted in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. But in that flick, Professor Jones had written the diary based off of decades of careful and obsessive study. Here, we're led to believe that Alan Quatermain himself had once been to all of these locations and filled in the codes and keys necessary to get past all the traps, which begs the question, why the fuck are we even looking for the heart of Atlantis if Alan bloody Quatermain already found it? But that's nitpicking, and you kids don't like it when I nitpick. So, the long and short of this is that none of these puzzles are brain-teasing in the slightest, which is what adventure gamers usually hope for in a title of this genre. Tomb Raider, Uncharted, Indiana Jones, all feature breaks in the action where the player is asked to make like Winnie the Pooh and think, but all we have here is to just look at the notebook and match the symbols and move on. And even if the puzzles felt clever utilizing that kind of paint-by-numbers routine, they still lose any charm they might have had because they're all so tedious to execute. For some, that's going to be a relief because they're going to want to get back to the action, but then they're going to remember that the action is inane and unsatisfying, and then they'll curse the day they ever bought this game. There is, however, a fun little bonus element to the puzzling in the form of hunting for treasure in each level we visit. At the beginning of the game, James mentions his great-grandfather's compass, which we then get to use throughout the whole of Deadfall Adventures. With the press of a key, the compass comes out, and it will either spin listlessly, or, if we're lucky, will point in a specific direction like a hound dog, informing us that there's a treasure to be picked up nearby. We can also find treasure maps in certain levels, but they're fucking useless and don't even line up correctly with the level design anyway, so just stick to the compass. But the purpose of the treasure hunt isn't strictly for the love of gold or the clearing of debts. No, these treasures align with 3 specific skill trees that James has access to, and the more of these treasures that you find, the more skills you can unlock. They're all pretty basic and infer that James is gathering mystical energy from his journey to find the heart of Atlantis. We have the Path of Life, which upgrades health and stamina, the Path of the Warrior, which upgrades reload speed and ammo capacity, and the Path of Light, which upgrades how fast your flashlight recharges. Out of everything that this game brings to the table, this is honestly my favorite aspect. I love a good treasure hunt, and some of the treasures aren't super easy to find either. In fact, there's a few of them that require the player to solve mini puzzles in order to grab them, and that's exactly the kind of thing that this game needed more of. A little more immersion into the world of the adventurer, the treasure hunter, the explorer. I did my best to find as many treasures as I could, but a few of them are really tricky. Part of me laments that this game just isn't interesting enough to play through a second time in order to try and find all of these treasures because, yeah, that's the shit I want in a game like this. And I know what you kids are thinking. I don't like secret hunting. I hate secret hunting, but I love treasure hunting.
Isn't it ironic?
So, okay, the story is balderdash, the gameplay is wilting the moment you open the box, and the puzzles are listless and brain dead. With all of this in mind, it's kind of hard to recommend experiencing the game in any way, shape, or form. In fact, where I started the game determined to find every single treasure, by the final stretch, I was more determined to just run through the last sections as quickly as possible just to be done with all this nonsense. So, is there anything redeeming here, kids? Sweet mother. Now, if you'll kindly notice here, the very first enemy I shoot down tumbles about with that extra special Stretch Armstrong ragdoll effect that Goat Simulator is known for. Except in Goat Simulator, that shit is on purpose. Here, this is most definitely not. I thought for sure that that was an indicator that we were in for something special. You know what I mean? Some sweet, exquisite jank that we can all point and laugh at and be entertained by and just have a blast with. I mean, look at this cinematic here. The stilted animation. Here, how Hagen's head's texture pops out and then back in. This guy, Stein, he's so beefy that his fucking neck keeps clipping through his shirt. His fucking neck. Over here, Agent Jennifer's head does a brief Silent Hill bobble, and then all that time, Hagen's hand down here is resting on his hip. Now, this clip is from early on in the game, super early. And I'm thinking at this point that if we're going to get more of this, then it's going to be a good fucking time at the races, kids. But oh no. The majority of the jank in this fucking game comes down to absolutely broken controls and gameplay. Sure, we get beautiful moments where, as the game reloads a checkpoint, James's equipment will float in midair for half a second before his hands magically load into the screen and reach out to cup his gear. But there isn't anything nearly as entertaining as the examples I've already given you. Well, okay, I did have a fantastic experience where I was fighting some Russians late in the game, dual revolvers out, but the animation broke in such a way that I was firing both revolvers, but only one of them actually had the animation of firing. This was so entertaining that I refused to switch weapons until the combat encounter was over, just to make sure I captured as much footage of this as I could. But there ends the entertainment, kids. The remainder of the jank lies thoroughly in frustration. For example, holding down the middle mouse button brings up an inventory wheel, which will allow you to select between your notebook, compass, or regular weapons. I rarely use the inventory wheel because your gear is also assigned to hotkeys, and that felt more natural in the moment to use. However, these hotkeys frequently break and refuse to actually work the way they're supposed to. I had the most frustration with my flashlight. I would press F to bring it out, and then press F again to put it away, but oftentimes I would press F to put the flashlight away, and it just wouldn't work. Other times, I would hit C for my compass to swap away from the flashlight, but the compass refused to come out until I pressed F to get rid of my flashlight, at which point James would then swap to the compass. Sometimes I just wanted to put my currently held equipment away, the flashlight, for example, but instead of putting the flashlight away, the F key would then swap me out to my compass. Half the time, I wasn't sure if I was actually going to equip something, swap to something, or simply stand there hammering away at the keyboard fruitlessly. James has a melee attack using a machete, but I rarely ever used this attack because the game just wouldn't let me. Melee is also bound to the middle mouse by default, a quick press versus a long hold for the inventory wheel, but I would click and click and click, and most of the time that goddamn attack simply wouldn't activate. Sometimes it did, but I think it was something like only once where it was actually useful. Instead, the game would try to pull up the inventory wheel, something that was absolutely unhelpful in the thick of combat. At one point in the Antarctic level, the game literally forgot my progress during a chapter transition. Shit you fucking not. If you look here, you can see I'm carrying twin revolvers and a Tommy gun in this section, where I'm trying to move a massive block of ice on a rail car so that I can proceed. Mind you, at this point in time, I'm also carrying one of those useless treasure maps. I found it earlier in the level. Remember that. Now, we walk into the tunnel. Scene fades out. And then the scene fades in with me holding a fucking shotgun in my hands. And when I switch to the compass, oh my goodness, look! A shotgun pistol! Moving onward past a combat encounter, I decided to go exploring, and I wanted to check my useless treasure map. But look up here, look. The game fucking forgot my progress in the middle of a fucking map transition. Throwing insult onto injury. Check out what happens immediately afterwards. Well, the game somehow registered my approach of the cliff as me sliding off of it and dumped me into water, which is instant death. That's not a glitch. It is instant death if you touch water in this game. My hunky himbo explorer man cannot fucking swim and will die upon contact with fucking water. This was the only time the game actually shoved me to my death, but there was one final insult at the very end which nearly made me quit. So I'm running through the final stage of the game, I solve a bunch of puzzles, I fight a bunch of zombies, I do the adventure thing, and at the very end of the level, right before the final boss, I made the silly decision to leap down and try and rescue Agent Jennifer, because I'm thinking she probably just needs a helping hand to get up. Well, of course, that's actually a dumb thing to think, because it's a really long fall, and I die when I hit the ground, but guess what? Guess the fuck what, kids? The checkpoint saved right before I hit the bottom. Oh yeah, you know what's coming. You know what this means, don't you? Now, since Deadfall Adventures doesn't have separate save files or separate checkpoints that you can load, My only option here was to restart the fucking level from the very beginning. Deadfall Adventures in a nutshell, kids. Like, the absolute multitude of jank going on in the mechanics here. It almost feels sort of meta, you know? Like, in the game, you're dodging ancient traps and fascists, and in order to play the game, you have to dodge janky gameplay and ancient technology. Look, in the year of our Lord John Romero 2024, Unreal Engine 3 is practically ancient technology. It's less useful than the Doom engine. Jesus, we're even getting a new game on the Quake engine somehow. Deadfall Adventures falls prey to one of the oldest mistakes in the book: overreaching. It's pretty, don't get me wrong, but that beauty comes at the cost of texture pop-in, clipping graphics, and stuttering animations. The gameplay is stilted, the puzzles are mindless, and the whole thing feels like a Disneyland ride if the Disneyland ride was originally constructed back when the park first opened and had never gotten an update. Sure, the game looks the part, and it's clear that the Farm 51 put in a lot of effort to capture the look and feel of classic pulp adventure. If nothing else, the vibe and spirit of Uncharted, The Mummy, and a nudge of Indiana Jones. But the thing is that while Deadfall Adventures might understand the look of a pulp adventure, it doesn't understand the feel, the sensation of exploration, of solving puzzles, of awe and wonder mixed with terror and adrenaline. A nonsense plot that doesn't understand actual history doesn't help the situation either, because it further adds to the sensation of a hodgepodge of ideas melted into a bowl without consideration of where those ingredients came from or how they might mix together. I would love to recommend this for the novelty of it, or for the entertaining jank, but there's neither anything novel, nor is there anything entertaining about this game. Deadfall Adventures gets a 4 out of 10, and I'm very, very ready to uninstall this miserable experience and instead go pre-order Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Okay, fine, I won't pre-order it, but I do need to support Machine Games in the hopes that they're actually going to make a new Quake. Just let me get my hopes up. Kids, thank you so much for joining me on this adventure. I hope you found some entertainment out of it. Hey, guess what? I'm trying to make this my full-time job, and if you'd like to help support that endeavor, I have a link to my Patreon in the description. And I also have a YouTube membership if you prefer that route. Remember to like and share and all of that jazz. And until next time, sit up straight, eat your vegetables, stay hydrated. I'll see you next time.